Kate Milafalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. This is the second time I've made this video. I think it's puzzling, interesting, intriguing that my very first attempt was interfered with. I have never before had the weird kind of stuff go on in a video as I did. I made it last night because I have things to do today, and it was really bizarre. I can't even explain to you the bizarre things. So we'll try again and keep our fingers crossed here. This is the first in a series of videos about a book. This is not our Saturday book. This is independent of that. I will do a book for the weekend. But I'm going to proceed through this other book. I might as well show you right now. The Spirits book by Allan Kardec. I have recorded a short biography of him if you're interested in knowing who he is. There's a very good movie about him called Kardec. It's a foreign movie, Brazilian, in Portuguese with subtitles. It's excellent. And that might give you some background. This book was written in 1857. So I'll tell you a few things about it before we get going. I'm going to be covering the content of the book, and it's dense. There's a lot to it, and it requires discussion. So I'm right here today starting my coverage of the beginning of the book. It's not chapter one, it's the introduction, and it's a set of explanatory notes. It defines terms, that sort of thing. And then I'll be covering the chapters. When I do that, not 100% sure yet of exactly how we're going to format it, but I'll be joined by one or two other people, some you might recognize, and we're going to set this up as kind of a, first I'll present the information and then we'll do some discussion of it because it demands that. So this is a phenomenon, this book. When it came out in the context of really renewed social interest in things paranormal. And he got sort of swept up and dismissed in the wave of false paranormal stuff, people, you know, grifters. But I was really struck that the core of his message resonated so strongly for me, I felt obliged to cover this. I hope you'll agree with me. So when this book was written in the 1850s, people were really interested in communicating with the spirit world. And the whole notion of a spirit world, of communication with the dead, disincarnate bodies, it's global. It's always been a concept. It's always been a belief of some people. So it goes through time and it goes around the globe. It transcends time and culture. These phenomena don't obey our known laws of physics. They challenge our sense of reality. He believed, now a lot of this, most of this is in his words, so if it sounds like this is me speaking, it really isn't all the time. I may agree with him, I may not. These are his words in his book. And he says that this communication with the spirit world reveals the action of a free and intellectual force. And he does believe that spirits communicate with people physically. These spirits claim to belong to the realm of spiritual beings no longer in the body. And we're going to get real into definitions here. Communication between the spirit and the physical worlds, it's part of a natural order. It's not supernatural. It's a normal part of the natural world. And as I said, there's a recorded history of this through all cultures and times. This is nothing new. there's cyclical interest. Interest becomes more intense, and then something will happen to debunk one thing or two things, and everybody is swept away, dismissed with that, tarred by the same brush, basically. This very well can be, it's part of the natural world. It can very well be physics that we simply don't understand yet, or don't have the brain power to understand. So in 1857, when he wrote this book, he said the time for a universal recognition of this is now. So, cycles. So he believed that spirits are messengers and instruments of God. And I think we need to make a point right from the very beginning that this is in tandem with his Christian belief. He was really Christian, Catholic, I think. And there's sometimes a sense, often a sense, that communicating with spirits, dealing with the paranormal, is toying with the devil. But that's really not true. And going back into the history of Christian belief, Muslim belief, Jewish belief, there's always been communication between the spiritual world and the material world. Angels, you've heard the little thing called angels. That would be one example. And as in all things, we need to exercise discernment. That's the important thing. So having said that, he was hoping with this book to inaugurate a new era of regeneration for humans by the communications from these spirits. And in this book, he put together, chapter by chapter, the messages they gave him. And if you watch the movie, you see how he evolved his, turn off my heater, it's noisy, how he evolved his, how he developed his belief system. He used mediums, and he used his own writings. So some of it was his own information directly, and some of it was through other mediums. And all of it was, in his belief, communication from the spirit world. And he was hoping to establish a rational philosophy. He approached all this in a very kind of modern, scientific way for the times, without prejudice, without preconceived notions, systematically looking at this instead of being superstitious and fearful or conventional, to look at it with an analytical eye. And he said the only information that is in this book is thoughts and ideas that have been approved by the spirit world that gave them. Some of them claimed that they were well-known people at one point, that they had been alive in different times on the earth, that they had been sharing knowledge, preaching in their incarnation on earth, and now in the spirit world they continued with that mission, as it were. And some were not well known at all. Some were just ordinary folks and people who had been in the body, died, and their spirits had ascended. So this is from him, from the book. The mission of compiling this work was presented in writing and through various mediums with the following words. This is a message. Quote, "Be jealous and persevering in the work you have undertaken jointly with us being the spirits are speaking, for this work is ours. In the book you are to write, we will lay the foundations of the new edifice that is destined to unite all human beings in a common sentiment of love and charity. But before making it public, we will go through it with you to ensure its accuracy. We will be with you whenever you request our presence and will aid you in all your labors. As you've already been informed, the preparation of this book is only a part of the mission that has been given to you." Once again, these are the spirits speaking to Kardec, the author. Of the transmitted teachings, you are to keep some to yourself for the time being. We will tell you when to release them to the public, and meanwhile, make them the subject of your meditations so that you will be ready to work with them when the proper time comes. The vine branch we have drawn for you, and this was actually given to him in this spirit communication, symbolizes the physical body. The juice of the grape denotes the spirit. The grape itself represents the union between the body and the spirit. The grape matures in the branch until the juice acquires its quintessential properties. Likewise, the soul matures in the physical existence until it has acquired sufficient experiences to attain plenitude. Do not allow yourself to be discouraged by hostile criticism. You will have rancorous opponents, especially among those who benefit from the status quo. You will find enemies amongst yourselves. Where did it go? Even among the spirits, since those who are still earthbound often try to scatter seeds of doubt. Have trust in God, always move forward. We will always be near to sustain you. The time is close when the truth will shine forth on all sides. The vanity of some people who imagine they know all and are capable of explaining everything will give rise to conflicting opinions. However, those who have embraced the ideals of Jesus will be united in the same desire for goodness and brotherhood that will eventually spread the world over. And I would like to point out, if you notice the careful wording of this, those who have embraced the ideals of Jesus, not the religion, the faith, the person, but the ideals, the concepts. I think that's very important, because if we take the words ascribed to Jesus in the New Testament, if we take them to be true, or at least partially accurate, they're not unique to him. They echo many belief systems. There's a Venn diagram, the core of which is the unification of all belief systems, religious belief systems, all the wisdom of ascended beings. All the other stuff is extraneous, but there is that core, the message of love and compassion. And this is what they tell him, and this is what he's trying to tell us. But I really want to make that distinction, because I don't want anybody to mistakenly think that we're preaching one religion here. We're not. This is a much larger, broader, universal philosophy. So embracing the ideals of Jesus will be united in the same desire for goodness and brotherhood that will eventually spread the world over. Putting aside useless disputes about semantics, they will devote their energy solely to matters of practical importance. In the end, the essence of the teachings of the enlightened spirits is always the same. Perseverance will render your endeavor fruitful. In the future, the pleasure you will feel at the spreading of the doctrine and its right appreciation will be a rich reward for you. Do not be troubled by the thorns and stones that incredulous and wrong-minded persons will place in your path. Hold your confidence fast. It will ensure our help. With faith, you will reach the goal. Remember that good spirits aid those who serve God with humility and without self-interest. They desert the proud and ambitious and disown those who use heavenly gifts as a stepping stone for earthly advancement. Pride and ambition are barriers between God and humankind, for they blind humans to the splendors of celestial existence, and God cannot use the blind to spread the light. This is metaphorically speaking. And then it lists the self-identification of some of these spirits. John the Evangelist, St. Augustine, St. Vincent de Paul, St. Louis, Socrates, Plato, Fenelon, Franklin, Swedenborg, and the Spirit of Truth. And I would say that this is a translation. I believe this was written in French. And so there is some subtle difference between the meaning of French words and then the translation into the English, but the book does mention that. Okay. Now we begin, that was the prologue. Now we begin the explanatory notes, and this tries to establish agreement, base for the terminology. So spiritualism is the opposite of materialism. A spiritualist is anyone who believes that he has within something more than matter. So that's spiritualism, spiritualist, as compared to spiritism and spiritist. Slight difference there. And this would be anyone who admits the existence of spirit and communication with spirits, between spirits and the visible world. And the author noted that the distinction between these two sets of words is much bigger in French than it is in English. Spiritism is a doctrine founded in the relationship between the material and the spirit or invisible worlds. Followers of it are called spiritists. So the soul is defined differently. It could be defined in a number of different ways. First, you can look at it as the principle of organic life with no independent existence. It disappears at death. The dead body is like an out-of-order device. Once the dead body is no longer working, no soul. This is a purely materialistic definition, and that the soul is an effect of the body and not any kind of a motivating cause or force. Another way to look at it is that the soul is the principle of intelligence, that it is the universal agent of which every being absorbs a portion. That this predisposes a primary soul in the universe. So what we're looking at here would be maybe somebody else's more modern discussion of the source, and we're all part of the source. There is a primary soul in the universe which distributes its sparks to all intelligent life, and after death, the spark returns to the common source. It merges with it as water merges from the river to the sea. So this acknowledges that something lives on after physical death, but it's predicated on the belief that there is a death of the individual consciousness, that once you die, your soul, your spark, goes back to its origin, the source, but there's no distinction of you as an individual. There's no permanent individual identity. So nothing really remains after death of the individual, that all of us are a portion of God, the universal soul. This is similar to pantheism, that God is everywhere in the forces and workings of nature. And then the third way of looking at a soul, these are choices, it depends on who you are. The soul is a distinct being independent of matter, that it preserves individuality after death. And this seems to be an instinctive belief found in all civilizations across all times, that the soul is the cause and not the effect. And this is spiritualism. So the word soul has three different definitions or meanings, and we'll look at that. The soul is an immaterial, like not a physical thing, an individual being that resides in us and survives the body. This is the definition according to spiritism. It's the vital principle, the material and organic life common to all living things. It's distinct from independent of intellectual faculties. Many scientists regard it as a property of matter, that all matter has a soul. It's a scientific thing. Now remember, this book was written in the 1850s, so we're going to be hearing, I don't want to say less sophisticated, but maybe less informed scientific belief systems, scientific understanding of the time. And I'm not putting forward anything as true science or not true science. I'm just simply letting you know what their understanding was in the 1850s. I want to make that clear for YouTube. I don't want to get in trouble for giving misinformation. This is not misinformation. I'm not a proponent of any particular thing right now. I'm simply relating the story of the book. So the soul is absorbed into every living being the way that inert objects absorb light, is a belief. And he goes on in the book to equate this with the number of forces: electrical, magnetic, vital, nervous. These are all, some of these are quite antiquated terms in the context of our understanding today. But it's a given that organic beings contain some kind of a force that produces life. Intelligent thoughts are peculiar to some organic species and not all, and I think this might even be debatable today. The more we learn about animals, the more we realize that although perhaps less neurologically developed and less sophisticated in some ways, there's stuff going on up there. But this was what they thought in his time period. They believe that only humans have a moral conscience, which makes us superior. I think we could debate that all day long. The soul, word soul, is tossed about with a number of meanings, and we always have to distinguish what we're talking about for clarity. So he's qualifying the term soul for clarity in his context. So there's the vital soul, and that's all life, the principle of organic material life. Very broad. There's the intellectual soul. This could be called the intelligence, and it is, in his time, considered to be for sure in humans and in some animals. And then the spiritual soul. This is individuality after death, and this happens for humans only. That might be debatable as well. So I actually have gotten a little farther than I did in the last video, but this next part, well, let's go forward a little bit more. So some objections. He does a very good job of anticipating how people would argue against his ideas in this book, or the Spirit's ideas in this book. And he anticipates what the resistance and the objections will be, and he goes to the trouble of investigating and explaining. So most objections, he says, come from imperfectly observed facts. So, for example, now this was a time when people had parlor seances, and they did what was called table turning. This is the movement of objects psychically. This was very popular in his time. And it caught the public attention in the 1840s with the Fox sisters. But it's actually a phenomenon that has always been recorded, always been around. So in 1848 in New York, the Fox sisters created a very controversial situation. There was a study done. They claimed they would have seances, and they would do rapping and snaps and use those sounds to communicate with the spirits. This became very popular, got kind of caught on in the United States and in Europe. It happened, many people did this. And at the time, some assumed it was electricity in some other form. Now, let me reiterate for the benefit of YouTube, we're talking here about the science of the 1840s. So it's not going to agree with what we know or what we believe now, and I'm not putting it forward as information or truth. I'm simply describing what they believed in the past. The intensity of this phenomenon, it increased as the number of people in the room increased. This is some particular observation that was made. The more the merrier. You know, the more people you had in the seance, the more likely you were to have more and louder communications of sound. And the speculation was, is this some kind of non-understood yet human battery? Tables moved in circles, and some wondered if it was the effect of the stars or some force that was keeping the planet in orbit, or like the water going down the drain that went in circles down the drain. They just didn't know. But it wasn't always circular. Sometimes these tables would move in an irregular pattern. The table would shake, or it would overturn, and sometimes it would defy the laws of physics and rise into the air and hover. And these things were observed. It's hard to immediately jump to the conclusion that every single time it was a hoax. Some kind of phenomenon was going on. And this was explained as some unknown energy force, or a different kind of manifestation of electricity. And we do know, even now, you know, electricity can be associated with a loud noise. There are explanations for that now, but at the time, less was understood. Some few scientists regarded these phenomena as within the domain of physics or physiology, and therefore deserved to be studied. And they were open-minded enough to say, well, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what's going on here, rather than dismissing it for whatever superstitious, religious, or just being entrenched in your own science. Whatever those reasons were to resist studying it, let's study it. But he says, you know, most were closed-minded and full of disdain, and prejudice blinded the inquiries. Some were humble enough to admit that science might not know everything, and that is the nature of science. Science is ever-changing as new facts are discovered and proven. New data is received. Science evolves with it. That is the beauty of science. But because they could not reproduce or replicate these phenomena, they came to negative conclusions, and he's very much against that. He says that in his time, the phenomena happened even more than usual, and this demands an explanation. Why this moment in history? Why? He points out that many scientific phenomena require special conditions, and maybe we just don't know what the conditions were that were needed to replicate these particular phenomena at these times. So to make sense of a new order of phenomena, he says, one needs to understand the laws, clearly the laws of physics or nature or science or whatever the laws are around it. And without sustained observation, we cannot reach an understanding. And as he mentioned, there was a lot of resistance to this. Some claimed, oh, well, it's trickery. How can we be sure if it's not just our lack of understanding, he asks. How do you know it's trickery? Maybe it is. He's not denying. He didn't deny that. Some people could be hoaxing, but some might not be. And how do we know if we don't open our minds and study it? Earlier scientific discoveries were called tricks. He said, for example, he gives examples. Galvani, Italian scientist, who discovered that there were electrical impulses in animal tissue. This was the first real look at neurons and impulses. Galvanic skin response, named after him. He said you should look carefully at those making the claims of the phenomena. What do they gain from a hoax? Would they joke? Would they pull a prank? What kind of people were they? Would this be something that they would do? Now we're at a part where I'm going to stop because we start a new part of the book. So this is the end of our very first video on the Spirits book, and please let me know if this interests you and you're wanting to know the messages that he received, because they get right down to it. It's kind of like a paranormal Baltimore catechism. It's very interesting. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this video is a better quality than the last stupid video I tried to record. And in the meantime, slán go fóill, slánte.